Hi, my name is Damien and welcome to GoFly Online, and today we're going to be looking at knowing when to flare. So one of the major issues students have when learning how to land an aircraft is knowing where that flare height is. Now, the flare is a transitionary manoeuvre from our approach to our hold off and landing. So in most recreational aircraft, that flare point, the point where we transition from the approach to the hold off, is around about 7 to 10 feet or 2 to 3 metres depending on the aircraft. So about 2.5 to 3 metres in a sling aircraft. The problem is, how do people know what 2.5 to 3 metres or 8 to 10 feet looks like above the ground? The easiest way I've found over the last 10 years, set ourselves up to the approach now, is what I call the minibus approach. So it's just to imagine a minibus sitting at the end of the runway on the threshold. Most people know what a minibus looks like, and they can visualise the top of a minibus. When we imagine the bottom of our plane touching the imaginary minibus, the roof of the minibus, that's our indication to bring the eyes from the threshold up to the end of the runway and the horizon, and to start to ease back on the controls until we're eventually flying level with the runway at around 2 feet. So that imaginary minibus, we're picturing it now on the end of the runway, and the top of the roof is around between 2.5 to 3 metres height, and that's our flare point. At the moment our eyes are on the threshold. I'm going to count us down now from 30 feet, and at 10 feet, that's where the top of the minibus we've imagined should be. And that's where we start to flare. So we're looking now at the threshold, and we're counting down now. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet, there's the top of the minibus, we start to flare, power off until we're starting to fly level, now at 2 feet above the runway, and we're in the hold off phase of the flight, we're just waiting for sync, and then we ease back, eyes in the runway, ease back until the aircraft lands itself. As you gain more experience, the issue with having the minibus is particularly calandra where the threshold is right into the runway. By the time you flare, you end up landing a third of the way down the runway. So as we gain more experience, we need to imagine that minibus actually before the runway. So our flare point's actually before the runway if we want to land on that threshold. I'll demonstrate that now. From base good scan, attitude airspeed runway. So as I said, once we gain more experience, we actually bring that flare point back, particularly calandra because our threshold is right at the end, and if we flare on the threshold we're going to end up landing a third of the way down the runway. So at this point I'm imagining the flare point about 20 metres before the runway, and that's where I'm imagining my minibus and where it's time to flare. Nothing on final approach. So we're imagining the bus about 20 metres before the runway, that's where we're going to flare, so we're going to count down from 30 feet. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet, top of the minibus, and we start to flare, look at the end of the runway and fly level. Flying level now, holding off, and there we go, we landed just past the numbers. Oh, still floating, likes to float. And flap 1. Powering up, rudder is required, a little bit of back pressure and let the aircraft fly away itself. As we can see there, we landed pretty close to the numbers, a lot closer than we did before, just by bringing that flare point back a bit, or the imaginary minibus. Well, thanks for joining me today on GoFly Online. Remember, the flare height in most recreational aircraft is somewhere between 7 to 10 feet or 2.5 to 3 metres. I find the best way is to tell students to imagine a minibus either sitting at the end of the runway or just before the end of the runway. When the bottom of the aircraft touches the roof of the minibus, that's your indication to get your eyes up and start to flare, ease back in the controls, to transition into the hold-off phase of the flight. Well, thanks for joining us today. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to our platform at www.gofly.online. Thanks a lot, happy and safe flying, and see you next time.